Jeffrey Campbell, welcome to the Preconstruction podcast.
Hi, Gareth. Thank you for having me. Been looking forward to this for some time now as a longtime listener to the podcast.
Good, glad, really appreciate your support. This actually nearly didn't happen, folks. We just spent about 22 minutes talking about golf. So there is probably another episode of the Pre-Construction Golf podcast coming out with that. As an avid golf player, and Jeffrey, I am delighted, has announced that he will be representing the US in the Pre-Construction Ryder Cup in San Diego in May.
I'm looking forward to it. If you want to throw a Canadian group in there, I'm actually Canadian and can
Oh, oh,
join the President's Cup team.
not well. If you're Canadian, that makes you more European than US. So since you're playing off two or three, I think you're going to have to be put over to the. Have you got any European roots?
Scotland.
There you
Yeah.
are. You're in. You're
Campbell.
in.
I think all Campbells are from Scotland, aren't they?
You're in my team. There it is. It's sorted. Love it.
Can't
Well,
wait.
listen. Thanks for making the time. For anybody that doesn't know you, Jeffrey, give us a quick overview.
Certainly, yeah. So I obviously just started, born in Canada, didn't stay there long, moved to the US as a child through my father's career path and bounced around a number of states. Landed in Connecticut for my higher education, attending the University of Hartford, which I decided to take mechanical engineering. Didn't really have a plan in place other than I really liked math. So figured if I took mechanical engineering, that would open avenues to wherever. But the primary reason I ended up at the University of Hartford was to play Division I golf on a full scholarship. And not too many schools allow you to do Division I sport and engineering at the same time, I come to find out. So it was kind of why I landed close to home in a northeastern state as opposed to going south where you could golf full year. And it was great because I played as a freshman and was able to attend engineering school, uh, which was a fantastic experience. And speaking of Europe, I had my roommate was from the Czech Republic, all 4 years, so got exposed to a really neat experience that led to kind of a lot where I'm at today. And after graduation, wasn't sure what to do with myself or my career, and moved to Florida to golf professionally for a little bit and wait tables to keep cash flowing. Um, Quickly, roughly about 12 months into that, realized there are 2,000 plus kids trying to play professionally on mini tours, and I did not have the mental ability to do it for money. So learned that, quickly used my engineering degree, and coincidentally met my first boss golfing, who then said, "Why don't you come work in construction?" Even though I had a mechanical engineering degree. So I first started in civil highway construction, heavy civil, widening a 7 mile stretch of Interstate 4 between Orlando and Tampa, Florida. Great exposure working on state highway projects, working for the state. But I was too much. When you work for state on stuff like that, you have to put in 5 years before you could become an engineer two, and then another 5 years before you could become an engineer three. I didn't have the patience for that process and quickly left and went over to the private side of construction, more on the engineering, geotechnical side as a subcontractor, which was great. Educated me on all types of projects from military base work to bridges to high rise to schools and everything in between. But it wasn't enough. As I continued to educate myself, get some leadership experience, I really wanted to be part of the entire project, not just a piece of the project. So at some point, as I transitioned to late 20s and early 30s, joined at the time, which was a global powerhouse, was Bovis Lend Lease, and they were becoming Lend Lease at the time. Unique opportunity there. You would think of them as major billion-dollar developments globally. What most people don't know is they had a multi-site division, specifically in the hospitality sector, where you were acting as an owner's rep. So I quickly jumped from being a subconsultant to an owner's rep, helping to rebrand 600 and something hotels in the entire country. I spent a lot of time in the Denver area. I can't recall the numbers. I think you have them, Gareth, but some 1,100 rooms in 6 months. I was overseeing from a renovation standpoint, rebranding standpoint, as an owner's rep, which was great because I was exposed to all the front end work financially, building the budgets, hiring the contractors, looking at all their subcontractor bids, really seeing the process from an owner's lens, but also from a financial side of things and how you put that all together. And then I was seeing it all the way through to turnover. Awesome, loved my job, minus the travel that came with it. I would be gone for 30, 40, 50 days at a time. In that time frame, met my now wife in Tampa, Florida. She was a Clevelander and got to be the point where we wanted to start a family, and being gone for that much, it was either career or family, and I chose family, which you could probably see by the artwork behind me.
Beautiful.
Yeah, just so we relocated to Cleveland, Ohio, to start a family. I still stayed with Glenn Lease during that time, but the travel still wore on our young relationship. We're circling back to golf. Was out a member guest at the local club here I belong to. The owner of Cleveland Construction was also at the member guest. Cleveland Construction, where I currently work. We were on the patio post round. Someone told me you should talk to this guy, and literally 4 days later, I had a job offer, and the following week started as a project manager on a project in downtown Cleveland, and got me into adaptive reuse, which I know the group's talked about quite a bit on a number of podcasts, as it continues to be a growing trend nationally. My first project with Cleveland was converting a 17-story building into 305 apartments. It was my first exposure to that type of construction, the historical tax credit component, and having to maintain certain elements of the building, while getting trades to snake through a building that's partially occupied by commercial tenants. It was every complicated thing you can get thrown is involved in one of those projects, and I just fell in love with it. Didn't get to see the project through due to some restructuring and growth within our organization. In my previous life at Lend-Lease, our vice president thought I'd be a good fit to run Precon and get involved in the pre-construction process with my background in numbers, budget.
That's early. That's
Yeah.
early, Jeff. I'm just thinking, I mean, obviously you're in the company, your first project, it's a difficult project. I mean, adaptive reuse isn't for the faint-hearted, but your first project within a GC, they obviously saw something in you to be able to say, listen, this guy's the pre-con, he's going to be the pre-con leader, he's going to step in as a pre-con manager. What was your response to it initially?
I knew nothing of it because, I mean, even though it's been around for, I don't know, 20 plus years, it's still, this is going back 8 years, a pretty new process. I mean, at that time, Cleveland Construction hard bid, traditional design bid build 80% of their work, and there was only a little bit that was negotiated. And fast forward 8 years, we don't hard bid almost anything. We almost negotiate in pre-con. And I think what I didn't see in myself, but our executives saw, was my ability to communicate with the client. They saw that right away. And that's not easy for someone to do all the numbers, manage the process, and communicate professionally with a client. And they saw it right away with a very difficult client on that project. And they're like, this guy needs to be in front of a lot of our clients, not just one-on-one project. And, I saw it as a wonderful opportunity to get to see a bunch of projects, get to be involved in the business development side, because I think anyone in pre-con is involved in that regardless. You're delivering a message to a client.
Absolutely. And then do you think that the Lend-Lease experience on the owner's rep side, do you think that was something that really crafted your communication skills, or do you think it came naturally?
I certainly think it helped craft that skill. I mean, I had to handle a lot. I think what really Lend-Lease helped me with was the multitasking of multiple projects, where if someone's on one project, I'm not saying you're not multitasking, but you're focused on that one project, where I was bouncing between 12 projects at a time in my previous life. That now in pre-con, if I look at my board over there, I think we have 18 different projects at various stages of pre-construction process. So prior to our phone call, I was working on a project in Columbus, but here when I get off of our podcast, I'm working on a school in another community that is halfway through pre-con, and I love that ability to jump from two totally different product types, construction types. I think that flexibility and the uniqueness to that is also probably what they pulled from the Lend-Lease experience.
Yeah, the fast-paced environment, because I mean that is the big advantage. I say advantage, but it's a big thrill within pre-con is the amount of projects that you go through and you see, and then obviously communication on the owner's side is vital. So you would have pulled that and went to the pre-con. How difficult was that? I mean, back in 2015, 2017, I'm talking about that adaptive reuse, 305 luxury apartments. I mean, obviously COVID hit then, there was a lot of adaptive reuse. It was basically an office block put into luxury apartments. How difficult a project was that, and what was the biggest challenges?
The biggest challenges in those, in my opinion, are just on a consistent basis, because I've now been part of 17 or 8 of them in the last 8 years, just as our company has done and completed, is the MEPs. They're the biggest dollar already, and they just trying to work within existing spaces, existing shafts. It gets them that gets to be the most complicated. Like replacing a window is replacing a window, whether it's new construction or adaptive reuse. Modernizing elevators get a bit complicated, but you just plan accordingly. So I tend to land on the MEPs, and the message that I try to relay to a lot of these developers, that if you haven't brought on like especially in adaptive reuse, if you don't have a contractor on your team, let alone the mechanical sub helping out, you're just setting yourself up for a disaster downstream. And we've seen that in a couple of jobs where they take it all the way through design, and then you bring in a trade and a GC and a trade to budgets shot. So I think that's the most complicated. What I'm starting to see a shift in is as developers become more educated and there's more of these adaptive reuse, and they listen to folks like yourself and your interviews to talk about it, is we're seeing a lot more flexibility and allowing us to bring on our specifically those trade partners right at the beginning, just to help the engineers with all the unknowns and where things are going to fit. And it gets tough. We talk a lot about the future of the virtual side of things, and it gets really tough in an existing structure to get it fully scanned appropriately and to see existing conditions unless you demo first, which a lot of times schedule and pricing don't allow. So you're kind of demoing and starting infill all at the same time. So that coordination mechanically gets really, really challenging.
Brilliant. And then we talked about MEP. I mean, MEP side of every building. I mean, I had a data center expert on last week, and it can be up to 75% of those sort of projects. Are the MEP, and I know that from the trades point of view, they like new construction, doing the adaptive reuse and the renovation stuff. It's not exactly their first choice. How difficult is it to attract them to those projects? Because I think you spoke at a recent MEP conference from the GC side. How difficult it is to sell those types of projects to the mechanical, electrical, and piping companies?
Extremely. It's very difficult, especially in a new market. Somewhere like Cleveland, if we're working in our home market, because it's been around now for a while. If you look at data, Cleveland's always one of the top few cities in the country as far as leading the efforts of adaptive reuse. So the market has educated itself. And so most of our trade partners really know how to be successful at it through live and learn, right? Some of those early ones we did were struggles, but they learned from them and they learned how to become profitable and efficient. So my message, one of the things we talked about at the conference was just really spending the time with the documents in the building with the estimator that might be handling your scope, or myself. A lot of times I'll take on the MEPs myself on the adaptive reuse specifically, just because I've lived it now for 8 years and I just understand the complexity there. But it's just the educating, and you said it best, it's a sale. I mean, as much as I had to learn how to communicate with developers, I've equally have to communicate in the same way to subcontractors, and we're not building them without them. So it's not easy. I have a large job in Memphis, Tennessee right now. We're taking a 38-story building apart and going to try to put it back together. And that market's not seen that. So it's really a challenge with those trade partners locally, and the owners, as much as they want to use local subcontractor has blessed our flexibility to go to some of our other resources and see if there's an opportunity to help steer the project in line with what we expect it to cost. Because a lot of times when the trade partners are scared of something like an adaptive use, if they haven't done it, they add a premium for all the unknowns. They'll throw a 30% contingency on their number because they have no idea what to expect because they've never done it. So it's really the amount of effort that goes in educating them how efficient they can be. Because in the long run, once a building's gutted, it goes back to being like a new build in many cases.
Yeah, 100%. It's stripped back that much that it's basically just current shell. And then going into somewhere like Memphis, they're that busy, the MEP trades. Do you struggle getting bids, getting numbers, getting kind of that appetite?
I haven't, because it's such an iconic project for the city and it's right downtown. It's their tallest building. I have not had too much trouble getting people interested. 6, 7, 8 mechanical subs all bidding. They're working on a Ford electric EV plant. They're working on a Google plant. They're working at the data centers. It's not as appealing to do an adaptive reuse. So their pricing kind of reflects like, well, if I get it, great. So here's the number and we'll do it if it's this number. And I'm like, well, this number doesn't make the deal go because it's a private developer for, they can't just pay the premium. So trying to find the right partners and educate them has been a struggle. There are not a lot of high-rise construction in Memphis, Tennessee, and in years now. So you're now, even though it's a structure's already standing, the putback is high-rise.
Yeah.
And they haven't lived in that world, both on the engineering side, the engineer and the trade partner side. So it's been a monumental effort the last 12 months to get there.
Brilliant. Have you finished that project?
No, that one's just started. That one's we've done. That was a unique one that had some grants that allowed the demo to go first.
Okay.
It'll be actually out of the 20 of our adaptive reuse projects, that's the first one we've been able to demo first. Right. And so we're getting to see everything. It's going to make the putback so much quicker. So I might spend a lot of time with the data I'm getting from it to try to learn a way to maybe get demo going quicker and how it could benefit the end user. So the putback work starts end of April.
Brilliant. Love it. And you mentioned there the scanning of old buildings. How important is that and how early in the process do you do that? Is that something that you require upfront from the client? Say, listen, I need a scanned model of the building and what I'm going to be working with?
We push for it. It doesn't always make the budget. It depends on the complexity and the size of the project as well. We have a couple that are 120,000 square foot building converting to 110 units. You can get away with a little less there. And usually the budget's a little tighter. On a bigger project, yes, we 110% push for it immediately as quickly as we can. Existing floor conditions. And then as we start demo, we'll get back in there and then have, gutted conditions so that we are seeing everything, because that little bit of money in the grand scheme of things being spent up front is saving you it in the back end with the coordination that on goes. So we push it on all of them.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm just hearing more and more VPs, directors are basically saying it's a prerequisite. It needs to be done, especially on those projects because it flares up so much.
Yeah, we don't even give any client an option from a BIM coordination standpoint. That's just protocol at this point.
Brilliant. I love it. Yeah. And then of course your mechanical degree, you know how to call out the mechanical trade on any dodgy pricing.
Yep. I'd like to think so.
Yeah. Love it.
It's so difficult these days with the way things are going, and we're at a point where I see plumbing numbers almost the same as some of the mechanical numbers, and I try to wrap my brain around that, and it's just the reality of availability. It's not a material side, it's just a labor challenge.
Yeah, funny. The guy I had on yesterday, talking about data centers that'll be released, probably the week before this one's released. So if anybody's interested in it, he was saying that the amount of money that electricians are getting paid on these data center projects, it is astronomical. It's like sometimes there's 200 a day uplift and 500 for completing a week. So these electricians are coming out with 230, 240K a year. Now, granted, they're relocating and they're moving their family, but it's still nice money.
Crazy. I mean, I don't know, and they're already pulling from a depleted pool of workforce in our industry anyway. Like how do the, multifamily folks make anything work when the electricians are all getting paid that? It's tough.
Yeah, it's a tough market, and I think he was
Yeah.
basically saying that it's probably only going to get worse, especially
Oh yeah.
from the amount of electricians that they're going to need over the next decade with these hyperscale data centers. So, fun
Remember,
time.
yeah, a few podcasts ago, you had another gentleman on the data center talking more on the power side, and he had the numbers of the growth trajectory for the next 10 years because his concern was how do we power them all, but he just said this isn't slowing down anytime soon, and I was like, we kind of missed the boat on our end as a company to get into that. It's tough to just get into data centers. It's a very unique type of construction, but there's plenty of offshoot work from it. So
That's that's it exactly. And almost the trade schools now are probably they're going to be 2 years behind the kind of the eight ball now, but hopefully they catch up soon. So back to you. So then obviously that I mean to me that adaptive reuse project was incredible. Then we had the Lend Lease project as well, the renovations. Talk to me then about pre-construction, stepping into pre-construction. Obviously, your maths background was a huge help. Then you had your experience on site, your mechanical engineering. What else helped you be a success within pre-construction?
that's a great question. We didn't really have that role here when I took it. So it was unique in the sense that our VP and myself got to just kind of decide what it was going to be and learning from I have friends in the business and just trying to dive into that. You know, putting budgets together to me wasn't the biggest challenge. It's not the estimating behind it as the process progressed. You have very smart estimators. A lot of these teams have folks they got an estimating team. It's the going back to communication. There are so many moving parts upstream, downstream. I present regularly within the organization when we onboard people, and then just in general. And there's a slide I use consistently that I call it takes a village, and it's a circle with the amount of people involved in a project to get to the project. And I think that's been the biggest challenge for me is learning how to communicate with each of those players, whether it's legal counsel, contract manager, client, the AHJs, the architects, the trade partners. I mean, you're talking about a lot of people just to get the job to start. Mm-hmm. That was the biggest shock to me, was the amount of effort that really goes in from first point of communication to breaking ground. And I think a lot, of the industry doesn't always understand that, and now does. I mean, it did when I first got into it. It's clearly just in attending the Advancing Pre-Construction Conference. I think my first one had like 120 people, and now we're in the four digits, which you can just continue to grow, which is exciting. But that was my biggest hurdle.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. And it then becomes capacity. I mean, obviously, when a fast moving environment as the owner's rep and as a project manager on that adaptive reuse project, you need to be able to get up to speed pretty quickly and kind of prioritize as a pre-construction professional what needs my attention, because I would imagine your to-do list is endless. I would imagine even now prioritizing, even as director of pre-construction. Actually, that's a good question. Going from pre-construction manager, because we would have a lot of senior estimators, pre-construction managers on here now. What is the big difference making that step from pre-con manager up to director?
I'll give you two answers because I think both of them contribute equally. The first one I think would probably be the most common answer is the challenge in trusting someone else to do what you had been doing for the last bit of years. And I think I was a pre-con manager for 5 years before becoming a director in 22. It's tough to let some of that, the day in and day out of a specific project, go off your plate and assign it to somebody. So I certainly struggled with that. I micromanaged right away, and I can now give myself a little pat on the back. I'm a little better at trusting and verifying as opposed to micromanaging as we continue to grow here. The other challenge that came with that was business development was going to roll under that position as well, where as a pre-con manager, you're involved in business development, but you're not necessarily the business development manager. As a director, at least within our organization, the business development manager rolls up to that director position well. So now I'm taking the sales side of it and the process of getting the construction together and just really trying to understand how to wear both hats. Because there's quite a pivot when you're trying to sell something and then trying to deliver a project to someone.
Yeah,
So that
I love
that
it.
was a new hurdle.
It's interesting that because you always hear in these big GCs, they always the pre-construction team blame the sales team for over promising, so they can't under deliver. But in Cleveland, you do that as well, so you know what you're selling. So I would imagine that the transition is much easier. How did that come about? Is that something that and how much of the sales side do you actually do on a day-to-day basis? Do you take it? Do you speak with architects? Do you go and have a go no go strategy on what projects you go after?
So I do. I'm much more heavily involved in it than I ever would imagined. It's much more that now. It's turned more into that than the pre-con side because that side's equally as important, managing that process. And fortunately for us, we have a unique portfolio that helps make that life a little easier. People call, there's incoming calls, which is nice to have. Those are a little easier sales cycles, especially on the adaptive reuse. They see our name tagged to something. How can you do this in another city for me? And we've been fortunate enough to figure it out in a number of cities. But yes, I am making cold calls. I believe it's still the number one way to get a sale. Pick up a phone and just call somebody. And sometimes they just want to talk golf. and then all of a sudden they're like, well, I like this guy. I want to work with him. So I enjoyed the relationship building aspect. And as I got into more of that side of the business, I really can appreciate what the developers have to go through just to get a deal done. So connecting the dots became kind of fun for me. But I did tell my organization, I was like, I don't want to lose the technical side because they asked me if I just wanted to be straight up on the sales side, and I said, no, we can get some sales managers. I would like to stay. I want my foot in the technical side. I don't think I could leave that behind, knowing my previous background. So
Yeah, that's where your value is. But I love the fact that you're willing to pick up the phone and do cold calls and seal deals. So how would you generate leads from that? I mean, is that something that comes in through the website, as you say, looking at signs? And how successful is that? Because I don't think people are doing that anymore, just because of the repeat business that a lot of people are getting.
Yeah, and we have a fair amount of repeat work. I mean, a lot of our adaptive reuse in the Midwest is repeat work. We do ground up hospitality. We have a good amount of repeat work there. But our owners want to grow, and if you just do repeat work, it gets very tough to grow. So we need new clients to grow the business. We have a pretty aggressive strategic plan over the next 5 years to get to where we want to be. So that involves some of the cold calling. I do a bit of research. Our team will see an article. They might see a broker and a business. If we're looking for a specific project type, like an adaptive reuse, they'll see a building sold. I'll find out who they sold it to and pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, we do this in these other cities. How can we help you make sure this makes sense for you? Others are, we might see a sign and call. We have a recent one. We just broke ground, or we just started working for. If you're not familiar with the travel center Buc-ee's,
Okay.
it's a large travel center based out of Texas that's expanding across the U.S. 100 fueling stations, 75,000 square foot retail center, and we just picked up the phone and called them as they knew they needed to expand, and they only had a couple GCs. And after a year of getting to know one another, we just mobilized on our first, and we have a second one starting here in March.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I love the old school pick up the phone and speak to people, because let's be honest, people do business with people. You can have that name on your shirt if you want, but people generally do business with good people. That's very, very interesting. And then tell me now, the sales side, obviously being a pre-construction professional, having the construction experience, how advantageous is that when you're speaking to a prospective client?
It's been great. I think our success rate has been higher because I'm not only able to talk about the company and the sales side, I'm also able to tell them, hey, we're seeing this trend. If I'm looking at a new build multifamily and say it's like a stick over podium type of deal, and we had a large office in Charlotte, I can just I can rattle off numbers because I'm living in those numbers as well. And these guys are like, oh, I didn't expect to get that out of this first meeting. I thought I'd have to meet someone else to then talk through that stuff. So it's not a true sales, meeting. It's, hey, this guy already can help me make a decision in the first meeting. I like this and how they operate. So it's helped the sales side of it to have the technical background and be able to communicate it. I think I've been blessed with that ability, which is tough for someone that's a numbers estimator to show face and stand up in front of a group and talk, or get in front of an interview and try to win work. Usually you have to have someone that's doing that specifically. And it certainly helped me out in my career growth and here at Cleveland Construction.
Yeah, it's a conundrum with a lot of estimators. We obviously have a lot of good pre-construction and estimating technology now that are able to navigate the numbers. We've got AI playing along with the numbers and the data sets, and to be able to spit out kind of almost a conceptual estimate, but being able to storytell with those numbers and how the building goes together. I think that's where the secret sauce is in a lot of pre-construction professionals.
I would agree. I mean, we have all the technology in the world now. We're fortunate. We actually at one of the conferences, I got educated on Join software, which we implemented a couple of years ago, and it can just take all our historical data, current data, our pre-construction process, spit those numbers out you're describing right away. But it doesn't help if I just email those numbers to somebody and they don't know what they're looking at and how we got to them and why maybe this one looked out of line. That conversation has to happen upon that delivery.
Brilliant. Funny on the tech side of things. Anything else you're looking at? I'm always interested in hearing what people's tech stacks are and how they're getting on, because there's loads of nice shiny tools out there.
Yeah, we look at them all. It's tough, being a mid-size, you're limited on what your spend is on additional technology. We as a company understand its value. We just started November using OpenSpace, which allows visibility on our projects. We're not so geographically driven. Like, we don't look for just work in Cleveland. We're more client driven and project driven. So we have work in random states. Well, how do you get visibility when it's nowhere near an office? It allows someone like myself. I just walked through OpenSpace, our project in Destin, Florida, because I'm meeting with the owner next week, and I wanted to get myself up to speed to see, hey, is the meeting minutes from the OAC matched with what's actually going on the site, so that I'm not throwing a curveball in my conversation because I'm already looking at the next project for that owner. So it was awesome to educate myself, and I literally took a tour through the entire building because it's taking a photo every half a second. And thus far, the feedback from our clients, because we're giving them that access, has been great, because now they're not having to fly to somewhere or go walk a site every 2 weeks. They can minimize some of their travel. So we've rolled that out across the company, and then we use Join for pre-con, and then some of your traditional Procore. And we continue to evaluate. We know that the 3D stuff is up and coming. How can we use that as that trend continues to grow? For us, we look at them all. We never say no, but it's got to be the right fit. And our biggest struggle thus far has been capturing the historical data from our crafts projects, our pre-con projects, our finished projects, and putting them into something that communicates with how we do pre-con.
Yeah, it's tough. Listen, everyone's struggling with it, Jeffrey. There's so much out there, but it seems like it's all single point solutions, getting it all talking to one another and getting the data flowing from start to finish. It's an ongoing problem. Well, listen, this has been amazing, Jeffrey, honestly. The good news is you're going to San Diego, so there's a good chance I'm going to get you to talk about another couple of subjects when you're there as well. So this is a nice taster. We're going to dive into a little bit more when we're there as well. But if there is anybody that's heard this, maybe it's got a couple of questions or follow-up questions, where's the best place to get you?
LinkedIn is great. My email, jcampbell@clevelandconstruction.com. And I respond. It's one of the things I take on my downtime, and I go through emails. I will respond and call whomever. I love talking about this, about our industry, about how we can get better. Clearly, every other industry has improved in the last 25 years, and we still struggle to get jobs done as a whole. And we got to get better, and we got to find people. So the more we can educate everyone out there, happy to answer questions.
I couldn't have said it better myself. You're right. We need to start shouting from the rooftops and getting people from other industries, friends, family members from other industries into construction, because the amount of stuff that we have to build over the next couple of decades, it is phenomenal. Brilliant. Well, listen, Jeffrey, have a great day. I'm looking forward to playing golf with you in San Diego and sitting down with you again.
Can't wait. It's snowing outside here, so ready for some sun.
I love it. Talk soon.
Perfect. Thanks, Gareth.